They were more than bandmates. They were brothers in boots, riding the wild wave of fame from Jersey dive bars to global domination. But somewhere between the platinum records and sold-out tours, something broke. And Richie Sambora, he's finally breaking his silence. For years, he kept it quiet until now. What really happened behind the glam, the grins, and the guitar solos? What did Jon Bon Jovi not say when Richie walked away? And why is one of rock's most iconic duos now a story of distance instead of reunion? This isn't just about ego or fame. It's about something far more personal. And once you hear what Richie reveals, you'll never hear those classic hits the same way again. Brothers in Jersey rock. Long before the limelight, Richie Sambora and Jon Bon Jovi were two driven musicians grinding it out in New Jersey's local rock scene. Hailing from the working-class towns of Woodbridge and Sayreville, respectively, both were molded by the grit and tenacity of their hometowns. Their early music ventures, Jon with the Wild Ones and Richie with bands like Message, saw them playing tiny clubs, VFW halls, and backyard gigs, chasing a dream that few believed could come true. What brought them together was more than just ambition. It was a shared reverence for musical storytellers like Bruce Springsteen and blues-driven showmen like Led Zeppelin. When Sambora officially joined Bon Jovi in 1983, it was a pivotal moment for the newly signed band. His arrival didn't just fill a guitar slot, it elevated the entire sound. His bluesy, emotionally charged playing and natural chemistry with Jon helped sculpt the anthemic, heartland rock sound that would define the band. In those early performances at clubs like the Fast Lane in Asbury Park, their synergy was unmistakable. Richie's instinct for arrangement and harmony perfectly complemented Jon's bold, radio-friendly vocals, creating a sound that felt both massive and personal. Their partnership turned out to be incredibly effective in the songs they composed together, tracks that connected across generations. The talkbox solo on Livin' on a Prayer, the brooding riffs of Wanted Dead or Alive, and the heartfelt sincerity of I'll Be There For You were all painstakingly crafted into the distinctive Bon Jovi sound. The band was just as close off stage. Images of laughing backstage, brotherly energy on tour, and countless shared moments painted the picture of two people deeply bonded through trust and shared struggle. Richie often served as Jon's emotional release valve amid the chaos that came with fame. But within that bond, a silent hierarchy was already forming. Even while they appeared most united, Jon was increasingly being positioned as the face of the brand. Richie stood just outside the spotlight on most occasions, despite co-writing many of the band's biggest hits and delivering some of their most memorable musical moments. Still committed to the vision they had built together, those early years weren't just about music. They were about two Jersey boys tapping into a once-in-a-lifetime rhythm that carried them from neighborhood garages to global stages. But as their bond deepened, something even more powerful was quietly taking shape behind the music. The soul behind the strings. As Bon Jovi's signature sound took shape in the mid-1980s, Richie Sambora wasn't just playing guitar, he was defining the sonic personality of the band. His tone, phrasing, and melodic instinct provided a contrast to the glam metal trends of the time, grounding the band in something more soulful and enduring. Sambora's style fused blues-based emotion with arena rock confidence, producing solos and rhythms that carried as much emotional weight as the lyrics themselves. His work on stage and in the studio was never about technical flair alone. It was about storytelling, each solo serving as a narrative arc that expanded the song's meaning. At the peak of their creative synergy, albums like Slippery, When Wet, and New Jersey became masterclasses in radio-friendly rock with depth. While Jon Bon Jovi delivered vocal power and pop accessibility, Sambora's fingerprints were all over the arrangements, giving the songs warmth, edge, and that unteachable sense of feel. Tracks like Never Say Goodbye and I'll Be There For You showcased his ability to build emotional resonance into guitar lines, while his harmonies elevated every chorus into anthemic territory. Richie wasn't simply accompanying, he was completing the emotional architecture of their biggest hits. Sambora's uniqueness did not just stem from his skill, but from his restraint and intuition. He knew when to hold back in silence, and when to let a solo rip, when to harmonize behind Jon's voice, and when to allow his guitar to scream. This balance became an important trademark of Bon Jovi's most recognizable songs, with his contributions to mood and texture surpassing any flashy production. Sambora brought nuance to a band often stereotyped for image over substance. Beneath all the glamour, the music had heart. While critics and musicians alike recognized Sambora as the unsung architect of Bon Jovi's emotional core, history often elevated Jon Bon Jovi as the frontman. The talkbox solo in "Livin' on a Prayer" became a symbol of a band that could marry showmanship with substance. Sambora's guitar work continues to electrify Bon Jovi's best-loved songs, a reminder that behind every powerhouse singer stands another remarkably talented guitarist who knows exactly how to communicate through strings. Tensions behind the hits. As Bon Jovi became one of the biggest bands in the world, cracks began to show beneath the surface glamour. From the late 1980s into the early 2000s, Jon Bon Jovi's rise as the face of the band became more than just a branding strategy. It shifted the entire internal structure. Richie Sambora, once a driving creative force and equal collaborator, began to feel sidelined in major decisions about the band's direction, image, and legacy. This shift wasn't immediate or dramatic, but rather a gradual erosion of influence that left Sambora in a role he hadn't signed up for, background support in a project he helped build from the ground up. The imbalance became especially pronounced as the pressures of constant touring and producing hit records mounted. The pace was relentless, leaving little room for collaboration or emotional recalibration. Sambora, who had once been deeply involved in shaping the band's musical vision, started to feel like his input carried less weight. As he later shared, being physically present in rehearsals and recording sessions didn't always mean having a voice. There was a growing disconnect between what the band looked like on stage, a unified juggernaut, and how fractured it felt behind closed doors. It was only made worse by the personal struggles Sambora faced, including addiction, and the emotional impact of his divorce. He became vulnerable and searched for stability. Yet the environment within the group no longer offered comfort. The thing that hurt the most was not what other people said or did. It was the feeling that, in the eyes of those closest to him, he had become invisible. When he spoke about problems or offered ideas, he often felt rejected or outnumbered. The bond, once strengthened by shared success, was gradually replaced by an insular hierarchy where, as Sambora would later explain, his place no longer felt secure. Unlike other famous partnerships that exploded into public feuds and headline-making interviews, this one dissolved in silence. For years, Sambora continued playing the role, touring the world, recording albums, and appearing as part of the group. But emotionally, he had already begun drifting away. By the time he left the band in 2013, the separation wasn't the result of one dramatic incident. It was the culmination of years spent trying to negotiate healthy boundaries within an environment that no longer felt collaborative or safe. The pressure wasn't explosive, it was corrosive, and it quietly unraveled one of rock's most iconic creative partnerships. The 2013 disappearance. In April 2013, just hours before a Bon Jovi show in Calgary, fans were blindsided by the sudden announcement Richie Sambora would not be performing. The official statement cited personal reasons, but offered no timeline or explanation, leaving speculation to spiral. As one of the band's most beloved members, Sambora's abrupt exit sparked confusion and concern among fans worldwide. Initially, many assumed it was a temporary break, perhaps due to health or family matters. But as weeks turned into months without his return, it became clear that something much deeper was unraveling behind the scenes. Privately, Sambora was reaching a breaking point. Years of relentless touring, creative disputes, and mounting frustration over being sidelined had culminated in emotional and physical burnout. In later interviews, including a 2024 New York Post feature, Sambora described the environment as toxic, saying the band had become more of a business than a brotherhood. He said he felt unheard, creatively restricted, and spiritually depleted. More importantly, he cited his daughter, Ava, as one of the biggest reasons for stepping away. He wanted to be present in her life, something the band's non-stop schedule simply didn't allow. It was an excruciating experience. Sambora has said he didn't even hear directly what was happening. Instead, he discovered the band had continued touring without him and learned through the internet that Phil X had been hired as his replacement. That, he admitted, felt like a punch to the gut. After a lifetime of loyalty and contribution, Sambora felt not merely replaced but erased, without even the courtesy of a conversation. In his own words, "It was like I disappeared and nobody even called." For fans, his absence was shocking, not just because of his brilliant guitar work and harmonies, but because many viewed Sambora as the emotional heart of Bon Jovi's music. Now, after years of silence, Richie has finally begun telling his side of the story. It wasn't one single argument that drove him away. It was years of feeling creatively and personally undervalued. His public comments in 2024 made that clear. The departure, he explained, was ultimately about self-preservation, family, and finally leaving a place that no longer felt like home. Family over fame. In the aftermath of Richie Sambora's unexpected exit from Bon Jovi's 2013 Because We Can Tour, one of the most personal reasons behind his decision gradually came to light: his daughter, Ava. In multiple interviews, including his 2024 comments featured by Yahoo and the New York Post, Sambora explained that stepping away from a band was less about conflict and more about prioritizing his role as a father. Ava, whom he shares with actress Heather Locklear, was entering her teenage years, and Sambora recognized that his constant touring was creating a void in their relationship. "You don't get those years back," he said, "and I didn't want to be a ghost in her life." For Sambora, balancing fatherhood with the demands of an international touring schedule had become impossible. He admitted that while music had given him everything, fame, fortune, and legacy, it had also taken a heavy toll on his personal life. With Ava navigating her formative years and the aftermath of her parents' highly publicized divorce, Richie believed that being present wasn't optional, it was essential. "I didn't want her to grow up without me being there," he explained. "Being a rock star didn't mean anything if I couldn't be a good dad." Fans reacted with mixed emotions. Some criticized Sambora for walking away from the tour, calling it unprofessional. Others praised his decision, arguing that it took courage to put family before fame. Looking back, his departure seems less like an impulsive decision and more like a deeply personal act of responsibility. A decade later, Sambora maintains that he didn't leave music, he simply refused to abandon his daughter. Today, he says his greatest legacy won't be found on stage, but in the relationship he built with Ava. On social media, he often speaks proudly of the woman she has become: creative, educated, and close to her father. Leaving the Bon Jovi family shocked fans and changed the course of the band, but Richie has never expressed regret about putting family first. "I can play guitar forever, but I only get one chance to be her dad." The goodbye may have been personal, but what followed spoke volumes without a word. Media silence, private fallout. Following Richie Sambora's abrupt departure from Bon Jovi in 2013, both he and Jon Bon Jovi maintained a notable silence. There were no heated interviews, no dramatic public feuds, and no official explanation beyond vague references to personal reasons. Yet the absence of words said plenty. According to longtime observers, the friendship and professional partnership between Richie and Jon had already begun to fracture well before the tour. While the band continued to appear publicly as a polished, unified act, privately the tension had reached a breaking point. Creative differences, personal disconnection, and growing resentment simmered beneath the surface. One of the clearest signs of the divide was the way decision-making evolved within the band. Sambora, once a key contributor to the group's creative process, gradually found himself excluded from major discussions. In later interviews, he revealed that toward the end he felt like a hired gun rather than a founding member. Studio sessions reportedly became colder, more transactional, and far less collaborative. According to his 2024 interview with Yahoo Entertainment, Sambora reached a point where he no longer felt heard or valued. It stopped feeling like a band and more like a corporation. Despite the growing frustration, Sambora remained publicly silent for years. Only much later did he begin speaking openly about the emotional scars the experience had left behind. In recent interviews, he described the environment as emotionally and creatively draining, saying it had become toxic. The silent rift wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was a slow, painful erosion of trust, respect, and warmth.